If you understand this principle, money will never be a challenge again. Not because money will magically fall into your life, not because you'll suddenly become lucky, but because once this principle is clear in your mind, your relationship with money changes permanently. Most people spend their entire lives chasing money without ever understanding how it actually works. They work harder, stress more, and still feel like they're running in place. They believe money is something you earn, something you're given, something controlled by circumstances, bosses, economies, or luck. And as long as they believe that, money will always feel difficult, unpredictable, and scarce. This audiobook is not about quick tricks, secret hacks, or unrealistic promises. It is about a foundational principle that governs money the same way gravity governs the physical world. Ignore it, and no amount of effort will help you. Understand it, and money begins to respond to you differently. Across 9 sessions, we will slowly and clearly unpack this principle. Each session builds on the last. Nothing here requires advanced math, special connections, or starting capital. What it requires is attention, honesty, and a willingness to see money in a way most people never do. Listen carefully, not casually, because once you truly understand what you're about to hear, you won't be able to unsee it. And from that point forward, money stops being a mystery. Now let's begin. Money does not respond to need. This is the first truth most people struggle to accept. You can need money desperately and still not have it. You can want it badly, pray for it, stress over it, and work endlessly for it. And none of that guarantees it will come. If money responded to need, the hardest working and most desperate people would be the richest. But reality shows the opposite. Money responds to value, not effort, not time, not struggle. Value. This is where most people get confused. They believe that showing up, working hard, and staying busy automatically creates value. But effort and value are not the same thing. Effort is what you put in. Value is what others receive. Money is simply a measurement tool. It measures how much value you deliver in a form that other people want, trust, and are willing to exchange for. That's it. Nothing mystical, nothing emotional, just value moving through a system. Think about it. The market doesn't care how tired you are. It doesn't care how long you worked. It doesn't care how badly you need to pay your bills. It only responds to one thing: how useful, rare, scalable, or desirable what you offer is. Once you see this clearly, you stop asking the wrong questions. Instead of asking, "Why is money so hard?" you start asking, "What value am I currently exchanging for money?" Most people never ask that question honestly. They tie their identity to effort. They say things like, "I worked so hard, I should be paid more," or "I've been here for years, I deserve more money." But money doesn't operate on deserving. It operates on demand and value alignment. Here's the uncomfortable truth. You are always paid exactly in proportion to the value the market perceives you provide, not the value you believe you provide. And that gap between perceived value and assumed value is where frustration lives. Once you understand this, money stops being personal. It stops being emotional. It becomes strategic. If your income is low, it's not a moral failure. It's not a sign you're unlucky. It's simply feedback. Feedback that says the value you're currently offering is either too common, too easy to replace, too limited in scale, or not clearly communicated. This is powerful because feedback can be acted on. You cannot negotiate with need. You cannot argue with effort, but you can increase value. Value can be sharpened. Value can be packaged differently. Value can be delivered to more people at once. Value can be positioned in a way that makes it obvious. Most people try to fix money by pushing harder in the same direction. They work longer hours, add more stress, and sacrifice more time. But if the value doesn't change, the money won't either. Imagine pouring more water into a cracked container. The problem isn't the water, it's the container. Your income is the container. Your value offering is the shape of that container. When you understand this principle, you stop blaming external forces and start redesigning the system. This is why some people seem to make money effortlessly. Not because they work less, but because their value is aligned with leverage. One decision, one product, one idea, one skill reaches many people instead of just 1 hour at a time. Time-based value has a ceiling. Leverage value does not. This is also why education alone doesn't guarantee wealth. Knowledge that isn't translated into value remains invisible to the market. The world does not pay for what you know. It pays for what you apply in a way that solves problems. Once this clicks, your focus changes. You stop asking, how can I make more money? And you start asking, how can I become more valuable in a way that scales? That single shift in thinking is where financial struggle begins to loosen its grip. Money stops being the goal. Value becomes the goal. Money becomes the byproduct. Sit with this idea. Let's settle. Don't rush past it, because everything we discuss in the next sessions builds on this foundation. And without this understanding, nothing else will fully make sense. If money responds to value, then the next question becomes unavoidable. Why do so many people create value and still struggle financially? They show up, they work, they contribute, they solve problems, and yet, money remains inconsistent, limited, or stressful. This is where the principle deepens, because value alone is not enough. Value must be recognized, trusted, and exchangeable. Money does not move toward hidden value. You can be incredibly skilled, intelligent, and capable, but if that value is invisible, unclear, or poorly positioned, the market treats it as if it doesn't exist. The world doesn't reward potential. It rewards perception. This is difficult for many people to accept because it feels unfair. They believe quality should speak for itself, but money does not listen for quality. It responds to signals. Signals of clarity, signals of confidence, signals of relevance. Think about how often people say, I'm good at what I do, but no one seems to notice. That statement reveals the real problem. The issue isn't the value itself. It's the translation of that value into a form the market understands immediately. Money flows where confusion is low. If people have to think too hard to understand what you do, why it matters, or how it helps them, they hesitate. And hesitation kills transactions. The market is fast, distracted, and impatient. Value that is not instantly obvious gets ignored. This is why two people with similar skills can earn dramatically different incomes. One makes their value obvious, simple, and emotionally relevant. The other assumes it will be discovered. It won't. Money does not discover. Money reacts. Another hard truth follows this. Being valuable is not the same as being needed. People don't pay for what they technically need. They pay for what they feel urgency around. Urgency is emotional, and emotion is what drives exchange. This is why pain solves faster than convenience. This is why solutions to visible problems earn more than solutions to abstract ones. This is why timing matters. Value that arrives at the wrong moment feels worthless. Value that arrives at the right moment feels priceless. Most people never think about timing. They focus only on effort and fairness. But the market is neither fair nor unfair. It is responsive. Here's something subtle but critical. Money flows towards certainty. People do not like risk when it comes to their resources. The more uncertain they feel about the outcome, the more they resist paying. This is why trust multiplies value. Two identical offerings, one trusted and one unknown, do not earn the same money. Trust reduces friction, and friction is the enemy of money flow. This is why reputation, proof, consistency, and communication matter more than raw ability. The market pays for confidence, not just competence. Once you understand this, you stop hiding behind statements like, if people just gave me a chance. The market doesn't give chances. It responds to clarity and reassurance. This is also why many people remain underpaid in environments where their value is capped. A system that limits how value is expressed also limits how much money can flow back. If your value can only be delivered one unit at a time, to one person at a time, in one narrow context, your income will always feel tight. Money prefers paths with fewer bottlenecks. And here's where mindset quietly sabotages people. Many believe that asking for visibility, positioning themselves, or clearly stating their value is arrogant or selfish. So they stay quiet. They wait. They hope. But silence does not signal value. It signals absence. The market does not reward humility. It rewards clarity. Understanding this changes how you move. You stop assuming the world owes you recognition. You start designing how your value is perceived, trusted, and exchanged. This doesn't mean manipulation. It means alignment, making it easy for others to understand why what you offer matters to them right now. Money accelerates when value, timing, and trust overlap. Miss one of these and money slows down. Miss two and it stops. Miss all three and you feel invisible. Most financial frustration comes from misalignment, not laziness. When you truly grasp this, you stop feeling bitter about money. You stop blaming systems, people, or circumstances. You realize money is giving you constant feedback about how clearly and effectively your value is landing. And feedback, once understood, becomes power. Let this sink in, because in the next session, we're going to talk about the most dangerous illusion people have about income, the belief that stability equals safety, and how that belief quietly keeps money difficult for life. One of the most convincing illusions people live under is the idea that stability creates safety. It sounds reasonable: predictable income, routine, certainty, the comfort of knowing what will arrive at the end of the month. For many, this feels like the responsible choice, the mature choice, the smart choice. But beneath that comfort is a misunderstanding that quietly limits how money can ever flow into their lives. Stability does not eliminate financial risk. It disguises it. When income comes from a single source, no matter how reliable it feels, all financial power is concentrated in one fragile point. One decision, one change, one shift in policy, technology, or leadership can disrupt everything. The appearance of safety comes from familiarity, not from resilience. Money favors systems that adapt, not systems that repeat. This is why people who cling too tightly to stability often feel trapped. They sense the risk, but it's hidden under routine. And because it's hidden, they don't prepare for it. They stop developing leverage. They stop expanding their value into new channels. They stop thinking strategically about income. The most dangerous financial position is not uncertainty. It's dependency. Dependency narrows options. When you depend on one stream, one role, one structure, your ability to negotiate, pivot, or walk away disappears. And money behaves differently toward those with limited options. It becomes defensive, fear-driven, reactive. This is why stress often increases as income becomes more stable. People sense, even if they can't articulate it, that their security is conditional. And conditional security creates anxiety. Contrast this with people who build multiple ways for value to flow. None of them may feel perfectly stable on their own, but together they create resilience. If one weakens, the others support it. Money moves more freely in systems like this because the individual is no longer operating from fear. Fear repels money, not emotionally but practically. Fear causes hesitation, short-term thinking, and poor decisions. It causes people to protect instead of expand, to hoard instead of invest, to cling instead of grow. Another subtle effect of chasing stability is that it rewards predictability over progress. Systems designed for stability resist change. They pay for consistency, not innovation. Over time, this trains people to suppress their highest value ideas in exchange for reliability. And here's the quiet cost. Value that isn't expressed begins to decay. Skills stagnate. Curiosity fades. Ambition shrinks to fit the container. Money becomes something you wait for instead of something you direct. This is not about quitting jobs or rejecting structure. It's about understanding the trade-off. Stability limits upside. It caps growth. And money, by nature, flows toward expansion. Growth attracts money because it signals future value. This is why people who take calculated risks often outperform those who avoid risk entirely. They are not reckless. They are responsive. They learn faster because feedback is immediate. And money loves environments where learning compounds. The irony is that true financial safety comes from optionality, not stability. Options create power. Power creates calm. Calm allows clear decisions. When you have options, you don't panic. When you don't panic, you don't sabotage yourself. Once you see this, You stop confusing comfort with security. You realize that being uncomfortable while expanding your value is far safer than being comfortable while depending on a single outcome. Money begins to feel lighter when it's not tied to survival. This session isn't meant to push you into chaos. It's meant to wake you up to the cost of false safety. Because as long as you equate stability with protection, you'll unconsciously resist the very moves that allow money to grow. Let this idea settle. In the next session, we'll talk about leverage, not the kind most people think of, but the kind that quietly separates those who struggle from those who scale. Most people believe money grows in proportion to effort. Work more, earn more. Push harder, get further. This belief is deeply ingrained, and at first glance it seems logical. But effort has a ceiling, and money does not scale well with ceilings. This is where leverage enters the picture. Leverage is the force that allows the same unit of effort to produce outsized results. Without leverage, income is limited by time, energy, and physical presence. With leverage, value continues to move even when you stop pushing. The tragedy is that most people use leverage every day but never recognize it as such. They interact with systems built by others, benefiting from leverage, while never building any of their own. They trade hours for income and accept that trade as permanent. Time-based income is fragile. If you stop, it stops. If you get sick, it pauses. If circumstances change, it disappears. There is no momentum, no carryover, no compounding effect. Leverage introduces momentum. There are only a few real forms of leverage in the world. Skills that compound, systems that scale, capital that circulates, and ideas that travel without your presence. Everything else is a variation of these. The moment value can be delivered more than once without being recreated from scratch, leverage is at work. A recorded lesson, a process, a product, a piece of intellectual property, a network, these are not just tools. They are multipliers. This is why some people can earn in a day what others earn in a year. Not because they're better people or work harder, but because their value is amplified. Leverage changes your relationship with time. You stop asking, how many hours can I give? And start asking, how many times can this value be used? This shift is subtle, but it rewires how you think about money. You begin to notice where your effort evaporates and where it accumulates. You see that most activities disappear the moment they're completed, while a few continue to produce returns long after the initial input. Most people spend their lives in evaporating effort. They answer the same questions repeatedly, solve the same problems over and over, reset every day to zero, and then they wonder why progress feels slow. Leverage allows progress to stack, but leverage requires a different kind of patience. You work now for results that arrive later. You invest before there is proof. You build when there is no applause. This is why most people avoid it. The rewards are delayed, and the ego wants immediate validation. Money doesn't reward impatience. It rewards structure. Another misunderstanding is that leverage is only for the wealthy. In reality, leverage is how wealth is created in the first place. Capital is just one form. Skill and ideas are accessible to almost anyone, but they require focus and long-term thinking. Leverage also demands responsibility. Poorly designed leverage amplifies mistakes. Weak ideas spread faster when scaled. This is why clarity matters. Before multiplying value, the value itself must be solid. When leverage is aligned with real demand, money begins to feel less exhausting. You're no longer chasing it. You're setting conditions for it to arrive. This is the turning point for many people. The moment they stop asking how to work harder and start asking how to work once and benefit many times. Sit with that, because in the next session, we'll explore why most people sabotage leverage without realizing it, and how their relationship with identity and ego quietly keeps money difficult. Even when people understand value and leverage intellectually, many never apply them. Not because they lack opportunity, but because of something far more subtle and powerful: identity. Money does not just interact with what you do. It interacts with who you believe you are. Most people carry an internal story about themselves that was formed long before they ever thought about wealth. That story defines what feels possible, what feels realistic, and what feels for people like me. And anything that threatens that identity creates resistance. This is why growth often feels uncomfortable. It challenges familiarity. It asks you to act out of character, to step beyond the role you've been rehearsing for years. And the mind interprets that as danger. Ego protects identity, not progress. If someone sees themselves as not a money person, they will unconsciously avoid opportunities that require financial confidence. If they see themselves as humble or low-key, they may resist visibility even when visibility is required for value to be recognized. If they see themselves as practical, they may dismiss scalable ideas as unrealistic. None of this is logical. It's protective. The ego would rather be consistent than successful. This is where many people quietly sabotage leverage. Leverage demands exposure. It asks you to put ideas, systems, or creations into the world where they can be judged. And judgment feels like a threat to identity. So instead of scaling value, people retreat into safe effort. Busy work, tasks that feel productive but don't expand reach, activities that preserve self-image while keeping income capped. This creates a strange contradiction. People say they want more money, but their behavior is designed to avoid the discomfort that money growth requires. Money expands through visibility, but visibility invites feedback, and feedback can bruise the ego. Here's another layer most people miss. Suffering becomes part of identity. Many unconsciously equate struggle with worth. If something comes too easily, they distrust it. If it doesn't require exhaustion, they question whether it's valid. But money is not impressed by struggle. It is impressed by results. When effort becomes a badge of honor, efficiency feels like cheating, and leverage feels suspicious. So people reject the very tools that would free them. To change your financial reality, identity must loosen. You don't have to become someone else, but you do have to stop defending the version of yourself that was built for survival instead of expansion. This means letting go of stories like, people like me don't do that, or that's not realistic, or I'm not ready yet. Readiness is not a prerequisite for leverage. Commitment is. Money flows toward those who act in alignment with future value, not past identity. This is why transformation often looks irrational from the outside. People shift environments, habits, language, and standards. They're not pretending. They're recalibrating who they are allowed to be. Once identity expands, behavior follows naturally. Visibility feels less threatening. Leverage feels less arrogant. Growth feels less like betrayal. And money begins to respond accordingly. This is not about positive thinking or confidence tricks. It's about removing internal friction. Friction slows everything, including financial momentum. When you are no longer conflicts with what money requires, progress accelerates. Let that settle, because in the next session, we'll talk about the role of focus, why scattered effort dilutes value, and how simplicity often creates more money than complexity ever will. One of the most common ways people keep money difficult is by spreading themselves too thin. They confuse movement with progress and activity with effectiveness. In doing so, they dilute the very value they're trying to create. Money responds to concentration. Scattered effort produces scattered results. When attention is divided across too many goals, skills, or directions, none of them reach the depth required to become valuable in the market. The result is constant motion with very little momentum. Focus is not about doing less for the sake of simplicity. It's about aligning energy where it compounds. Focus is not about doing less for the sake of simplicity. It's about aligning energy where it compounds. Most people underestimate how much value comes from staying with one direction long enough for it to mature. They jump too early, chase new ideas too often, and abandon paths just before leverage appears. The early stages of any value-building process feel slow and unrewarding. That discomfort pushes people to look elsewhere. But money rewards those who remain when novelty fades. Focus allows patterns to emerge. It sharpens understanding. It reveals inefficiencies and opportunities that only appear with repetition. Without focus, everything stays shallow. With focus, even simple ideas become powerful. There's a quiet confidence that comes from focus. When you're deeply invested in one direction, decisions become clearer. Distractions lose their pull. You stop reacting and start directing. Money moves faster in directed systems. Another illusion people fall into is complexity. They believe that if something is complicated, it must be valuable. So they overbuild, overthink, and overexplain. But complexity creates friction, and friction slows money. Simple value travels farther. The most effective ideas are often the easiest to understand and the hardest to ignore. Simplicity does not mean lack of depth. It means clarity of purpose. When value is clear, people act without hesitation. Focus also protects against emotional decision-making. When attention is scattered, emotions run the show. Every opportunity feels urgent. Every setback feels personal. Focus creates stability, not through rigidity, but through direction. This is why mastery is financially powerful. Mastery compresses effort. What takes others hours takes you minutes. What confuses others feels obvious. That compression is value. But mastery requires saying no. No to distractions. No to shortcuts. No to constant reinvention. Most people avoid this because saying no feels like loss. In reality, it creates space for gain. Focus is a filter. It removes noise so signal can strengthen. When focus aligns with leverage, money accelerates naturally. You're no longer juggling possibilities. You're building inevitability. This session is a reminder. Money is not impressed by how many things you touch. It responds to how deeply you develop what you choose. Let this settle, because in the next session, we'll talk about patience, not passive waiting, but strategic patience, and why rushing outcomes often pushes money further away. Patience is one of the most misunderstood forces in the pursuit of money. Most people hear the word and think of waiting, delaying action, or passively hoping that things will improve over time. But the kind of patience that creates wealth is not passive at all. It is active, intentional, and deeply strategic. Money does not reward speed. It rewards timing. Rushing is usually a response to anxiety. Anxiety about being behind. Anxiety about missing out. Anxiety about proving something to yourself or others. When anxiety drives decisions, people chase outcomes instead of building foundations. And outcomes without foundations rarely last. This is why fast money often disappears as quickly as it arrives. Strategic patience means continuing to act without demanding immediate results. It means trusting the process you're building even when external validation is absent. This is difficult because the early stages of value creation are quiet. There is no applause, no reassurance, only delayed feedback. Most people quit in the silence. They mistake lack of response for lack of progress. They interpret slow growth as failure. But growth in its early form is internal and structural. Systems are forming. Skills are sharpening. Understanding is deepening. None of this is visible yet, but all of it is necessary. Money moves after alignment, not before. Patience allows alignment to occur. Rushing interrupts it. When people push for results too early, they compromise quality, clarity, or trust. They cut corners. They chase attention instead of substance. And while this may create short-term movement, it weakens long-term flow. There's also a compounding effect to patience that most people overlook. Each day spent refining, improving, and reinforcing value adds weight. Over time, this weight becomes momentum, and momentum changes everything. What once required force begins to move on its own. This is why seasoned builders appear calm. They are not slow. They are precise. They know when to push and when to wait. They understand that forcing outcomes often costs more than it gives. Patience is also emotional discipline. It means not reacting to every fluctuation, not celebrating too early, not panicking too quickly. Money flows best in steady environments. Emotional volatility creates inconsistency, and inconsistency erodes trust. Another uncomfortable truth is that impatience is often disguised as ambition. People say they are hungry, driven, relentless. But beneath that drive is often fear. Fear of being irrelevant, left behind, or unseen. When fear sets the pace, mistakes multiply. Patience allows ambition to mature. It transforms urgency into intention. Instead of asking, "How fast can this work?" you start asking, "How strong can this become?" That question leads to better decisions, better structures, and ultimately, better financial outcomes. Patience also creates perspective. It allows you to see patterns over time instead of reacting to moments. With perspective, you recognize that setbacks are not signals to quit, but data points to adjust. You stop taking things personally and start taking them seriously. This is where many people unlock consistency. They stop swinging between extremes. They stop abandoning plans prematurely. They stop restarting from zero. Money respects continuity. There is power in staying with something long enough to understand it deeply, to see its cycles, to anticipate its shifts, to position yourself ahead of them instead of chasing behind. Patience does not mean doing nothing. It means doing the right things repeatedly without demanding immediate reward. And here is the paradox. The moment you stop obsessing over outcomes, outcomes accelerate. When desperation leaves, clarity arrives. When clarity arrives, money follows more easily. This session is about releasing the illusion that pressure creates progress. It doesn't. Structure does. Alignment does. Time does. Let this settle. Because in the next session, we will talk about detachment, why holding money too tightly repels it, and how a different relationship with control changes everything. Point one, the final barriers that keeps money feeling heavy, stressful, and difficult is attachment. Not attachment in the emotional sense alone, but attachment to control, to outcomes, to specific timelines, and to specific forms money must take. Money resists being clenched. The tighter people hold on to it mentally, the more rigid their decisions become. They overprotect. They hesitate. They avoid necessary risks. They try to force certainty in systems that are naturally dynamic. And in doing so, they slow the very flow they are trying to protect. Detachment does not mean indifference. It means flexibility. When you are detached, you can act without desperation. You can make decisions based on logic instead of fear. You can walk away from bad opportunities without panic and commit fully to good ones without needing constant reassurance. This is why people who need money often struggle to attract it. Need narrows vision. It creates tunnel thinking. Every decision becomes about survival. And survival thinking rarely leads to expansion. Money grows in environments of calm confidence. Detachment creates that calm. When you're not emotionally dependent on immediate outcomes, you can afford to think long-term. You can afford to build properly. You can afford to say no. And saying no is one of the most powerful financial skills there is. Another misunderstanding is the desire to control every variable. People want guarantees before they move, proof before they invest, certainty before they commit. But certainty is not a prerequisite for progress. It is a byproduct of repetition and feedback. Try to control everything freezes momentum. Money moves through imperfect systems that are allowed to evolve. When people loosen their grip, they create room for adaptation. They notice opportunities they would have missed while fixated on a single outcome. Detachment also changes how you experience wins and losses. Wins don't inflate the ego. Losses don't destroy confidence. Both become information. And information, when used correctly, compounds. This is why emotionally stable people often outperform emotionally intense ones over time. Stability allows consistency. Consistency allows refinement. Refinement increases value. Another layer of detachment involves identity. When money becomes proof of worth, every fluctuation feels personal. Gains feel validating. Losses feel humiliating. This emotional roller coaster leads to poor decisions. Money is a tool, not a mirror. When you stop using it to measure self-worth, you free yourself to use it strategically. You can invest without ego. You can adjust without shame. You can grow without fear of being exposed. Detachment also restores creativity. Fear constricts imagination. Calm expands it. When you're not obsessed with preserving what you have, you can think about building what doesn't exist yet. This is where innovation comes from. This is where leverage deepens. This is where money stops being something you chase and starts becoming something you steward. Stewardship is a powerful shift. It changes your role from seeker to manager, from reactor to architect. You stop asking what money will do for you and start asking how you can deploy it wisely. Money responds well to those who respect it without worshiping it. This session is about releasing the illusion that control equals safety. True safety comes from adaptability, from skills, systems, and mindset that can respond to change without panic. When you loosen your grip, money doesn't escape. It circulates. And circulation is where growth happens. Let this settle, because in the final session, we will bring everything together: value, leverage, identity, focus, patience, and detachment into one unified principle that explains why, once understood, money no longer feels like a lifelong struggle. Everything you've heard so far points to one quiet truth that most people never fully grasp. Money is not something you chase, earn, or force. Money is something you align with. Once alignment is in place, money stops feeling like a constant problem and starts behaving like a response. Value, leverage, identity, focus, patience, detachment. These are not separate ideas. They are parts of a single system. When even one of them is missing, money feels heavy. When they come together, money becomes fluid. At the center of it all is this principle. Money flows toward well-aligned value, moving through time with minimal friction. That's it. When value is real, clearly expressed, trusted, scalable, patiently built, emotionally detached, and consistently focused, money has no reason not to follow. Resistance disappears. Struggle fades. Effort becomes efficient. Most people spend their lives trying to fix money at the surface level. They chase higher income without increasing value. They seek stability without building resilience. They rush outcomes without laying foundations. They cling to control without learning adaptability. And so money feels like a fight. But once you see the system, you stop fighting the symptom and start adjusting the cause. Money was never punishing you. It was responding to misalignment. This is why two people in the same economy can have completely different financial realities. One is aligned, the other is not. Circumstances matter far less than structure. When your value is clear, you stop needing to convince. When leverage is in place, you stop exhausting yourself. When identity expands, you stop self-sabotaging. When focus sharpens, progress accelerates. When patience matures, momentum builds. When detachment settles in, fear dissolves. At that point, money no longer feels dramatic. It becomes practical. You stop obsessing over it because you understand it. You stop fearing loss because you trust your ability to rebuild. You stop chasing validation through numbers because your confidence is rooted in systems, not outcomes. This is what people mean when they say money becomes easy. Not effortless, but predictable, responsive, manageable. And here's the most important realization of all. Once alignment is achieved, money becomes a lagging indicator, not a leading one. It shows up after the work is done internally and structurally. By the time it arrives, you're no longer desperate for it. That's when money stops controlling you. From here on, the question is no longer, how do I make more money? The question becomes, how do I maintain alignment as I grow? That question keeps you grounded. It keeps you disciplined. It keeps you from repeating old patterns at higher levels. Because money does not test beginners the same way it tests those who have more. At higher levels, misalignment is punished faster. Ego is exposed quicker. Lack of focus becomes expensive. But if you've truly understood this principle, you're prepared. You know that whenever money feels tight, unclear, or stressful, the solution is not panic. It's diagnosis. You look at value. You look at leverage. You look at focus. You look at identity. You look at patience. You look at attachment. You realign, and money responds. This is why, once understood, money never feels like an unsolvable problem again. It becomes feedback, direction, a signal, and signals can always be adjusted. Sit with that, because understanding this doesn't just change how you earn, it changes how you live. You move with intention. You build with clarity. You grow without fear. And from that place, money is no longer a challenge. It's a consequence. If you've stayed through all 9 sessions, you've done something most people never do. You didn't just look for answers. You allowed your thinking to slow down, deepen, and reorganize. That alone separates you from the majority. Because money is not transformed by information alone. It's transformed by integration. What you've heard is not meant to be remembered as words. It's meant to be lived as a framework. There will be moments after this where old patterns try to return. Moments when fear whispers urgency. Moments when comparison creates doubt. Moments when impatience demands proof. That's normal. Alignment is not a permanent state. It's a practice. And the fact that you now recognize misalignment is a sign of progress, not failure. Remember this. Whenever money feels heavy again, it's not a verdict on you. It's a signal. A signal inviting you to pause and ask better questions. Where has value drifted? Where has focus scattered? Where has ego tightened its grip? Where has patience thinned? Where has leverage been neglected? You no longer need to react blindly. You can respond intentionally. This is where real confidence comes from. Not from numbers in an account, but from knowing you understand the system behind those numbers. When you understand the system, fear loses its authority. You may not always know the exact outcome, but you know the direction. And direction is power. There will be times when growth feels slow. Let it. Slow growth builds strong structures. There will be times when opportunity arrives suddenly. Receive it calmly. You don't need to rush or prove anything. You're not late. You're building something durable. Above all, don't turn this into pressure. This is not about becoming obsessed with money. It's about removing the struggle around it so you can live with more clarity, freedom, and intention. Money is a tool. When understood, it supports life instead of consuming it. Carry this understanding quietly. Apply it patiently. Refine it honestly. And trust this. Once you stop fighting money and start aligning with it, the relationship changes permanently. You may still work. You may still face challenges. But the confusion fades. The panic softens. The path becomes clearer. Thank yourself for listening. Thank yourself for staying present. And whenever you need to return to this foundation, you know where to find it. This is Payoff Podcast, where understanding creates payoff.